Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. Of course, my name is Stephen D. Kelly. This is the Stephen D. Kelly Show. We are TruthCat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. It's July 25th, 7/25/2024, almost August. My life is ticking away. Anyway, welcome to the show tonight. And before I go too far, I first of all want to say thank you to those people who are actually tuned in right now. Well, let me just take a quick look. Hi, guys. I appreciate it when people actually tune into the live show because I know a lot of the people that tune in, they look forward to this. They're excited about it. They get a lot of good stuff that they enjoy for the rest of the week, and they return and they're back. And I know a lot of you, I see, you'll listen to this as soon as I, start floating the recording around. More and more of you will be listening to that all week, and that's all good. But those of you that tune in live, of course, are extra special, and we get to have this conversation. Now, I have to be honest, I started out today, I thought, wow, it's Thursday, what am I going to talk about, all this and that, and I sometimes when I have in a situation like that, I'm tired of talking about Trump or whatever, or Jews or this or that, I reach out to you guys and I say, well, what do you think? And I did get two interesting responses from two different people. One was asking for a very thorough examination of Blush. Now, when I mean thorough, I'm talking about all the various different mechanics involved in how your soul or your whatever it is, how your body, your persona, how it's connected, and how this affects your ability to do different things, and et cetera, et cetera. So this is something we can certainly dive into. Another question, which I think was useful, was about the soul. And it was about mostly, I think this person was coming from a standpoint of Vril, which of course are corrupted entities, guys that basically are connected to the dark side, what we would call the Sith. You call Vril, I call Sith. There's a lot of confusion about what's going on here, if there's non-human, if these people are non-human or what. Either way, we'll get into that a little bit too, because the nature of the soul, as soon as you start talking about that, of course, you've got to get into the densities and everything else, and so that may work really nicely with the whole Lush thing. But it never fails sometime during the day, if not during the night prior to my show, something will happen. I'll get exposed to something, and it will cause me to have to step my brain into a high gear for a little while. And of course, something like that happened today. And it's a good lesson for me, because I know that sometimes when you see something, it may not register what it is that you're looking at. But our gut has a way of telling us what it is that we're looking at. They knock you across the head and say, "Hey, dummy, this is a significant thing you're looking at here," and that's very important. But that particular event that I'm not going to go into too much detail, at least at this point right now, because I don't think it's necessary, led me to have to look into a certain piece of wood that had stuff nailed to it, namely a human, as well as a little sign that read INRI, as we're told. But we're going to talk about that. So normally I would save the good stuff for the end of the show, but I know a lot of you have a short attention span, especially on Twitter. Oh my God, it's terrible. Or any of these platforms. They listen to the first 5 minutes if you're lucky, and that's it. They'll go, I'm going to listen to this later. Famous last words. But so I'm going to give you the good stuff at the beginning, okay? Because usually we want to wrap this up and give you some inspirational, but this isn't really per se inspirational. It's just kind of important, I think. And basically, we're going to talk about Roman execution just for a moment. I want you to think about that during the time of Christ, of course, when people were executed. Imagine it's today. And back then, of course, they used pieces of wood that you were connected to when you were supposed to die from dehydration and suffocation and shock, etc., from being nailed to this assemblage of wood that they would usually stick outside. So I want to explore that just a little bit, Okay, because this is kind of important. Okay, so bear in mind, the Romans were in charge of this part of town where, well, execution of Jesus took place, and it was their methods. Now, as far as killing people, one of the things that the Romans like to do is they would take a prisoner or whatever undesirable, and they would take a piece of wood, and the type of wood, of course, is important, but let's say they took a nice piece of pine, if you could find it. Back in those days, in that part of the world, they had cedar, they had pine. What else did they have? The acacia would be Africa and in Egypt, but they had at least 5 different types of wood that they could use. But cedar, of course, was the most prevalent because, of course, well, Phoenicia, nearby Phoenicia, what we call Lebanon, had Lebanese cedar. There were vast forests of it, and it was how the Phoenicians were able to build their navy. So anyway, the Romans probably used a piece of wood, but I'm going to assume they were using pine because typically they made the victim carry it. But anyway, so they would tie the guy up to one of these poles, tie him up really good, extra strong, lots and lots of rope, completely tie him up. And then they would douse this thing with some sort of pitch or flammable liquid, and they would light it on fire. Of course, they would do this at night, and it'd be very, well, let's just say I'm sure it was an interesting sight to look upon, because what they would do was they would carry out these executions just on the outside of town. Obviously, they're not going to do this inside of town because typically, well, there's a couple things. There's a gateway into the city, and everyone that goes in and out of the city is going to pass through this area. So they would do it prevalent spots somewhere along this road, just outside of town. That way, everyone wouldn't have to smell the burning corpses and everything else, the rotting and all that stuff, the smelly stuff. But if you're passing by, if you're going in and out of town, you would see this. And that, of course, was meant to show everybody that the Romans were serious. This is what happens to you when you break the laws and you get punished. We're not just going to kill you. We're going to put you out somewhere where everyone's going to have to look at you, and they're going to know who you are and what you did, etc. And it's going to be a constant reminder because the bodies are going to be out there rotting, nailed up to these pieces of wood. But anyway, just to give you a little bit of perspective, I know a lot of times when you see a crucifix or you see depictions of the crucifixion, they show these massive crosses that Christ is nailed to. Now, yeah, he did have to carry this thing in the street. So imagine you're at Home Depot and you've got, say, a 4x4 made out of cedar or pine, construction project. And let's say this thing's about 10 foot long, all right? And then you've got another one attached to it that's maybe, I don't know, 4 or 5 foot long, a little bit halfway, third of the way up of this thing, okay? So now you've got to carry this thing. So imagine, all right, now this is a big long piece of wood. Obviously, it can't be hundreds and hundreds of pounds because Jesus had to carry this thing. So it's going to be about the size of a 2x4, just strong enough to stick in a hole in the ground and hold up the weight of your body without bending over. And obviously, if they're just going to torch the wood or throw it away or turn you into a Roman candle, like I said earlier, they'd, burn you on the outside of town. How pleasant, right? They turn you into a streetlight out on the outside of town. Anyway, so yeah, that's what it would have been like. They would have used big old iron nails. Now, why is that interesting? Well, because it happened. I believe that they're out there. That stuff is out there. But the part of the cross tonight that I'm kind of focused on right now is the part where Pontius Pilate or the Roman soldiers had to attach the notation that Pontius Pilate had attached. So when the person was executed, the last thing they did after sticking you up there was somebody would come along with a ladder, prop it up there, and they would they would take your official death notice or whatever it was that was written by Pontius Pilate, and they would nail it up above your head. And this way, when people came down the road, they could look up and go, wow, who's that? I wonder what he did. And there it would be right there. So obviously there's a lot of different stories about what happened and what was written and whether or not this thing was written. And I'm sure that it happened, and I'm sure somebody's got that piece of wood saved somewhere with that nail. The note, I do not think it lasted very long, but I'm pretty sure that piece of wood is still around. Now, what did it say? Well, it was written in 3 languages. Okay, because obviously it was intended for everybody that was going up and down the road to be, so they would have no mistake of who it was that the Romans were dealing with. So the 3 languages were Hebrew and Greek and Latin, which of course, Romans spoke Latin. And because of the Latin language that the Romans spoke, a certain portion of the note that was written in Latin is the one that the church talks about the most. And when we have modern representations of the cross, there's going to be a little sign at the top that says INRI. Now, I'm not going to try to pronounce the Latin. I can tell you what basically it was in English, which is pretty simple. And of course, the I represents a J, and the N represents an N, and the R represents an R, in this case the word Rex, or king. So the inscription was intended to mean, and the words were completely written there. Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews, is what was written there in Latin. And of course, I can't read Latin, so I'm not going to try. Okay, and then of course that was repeated in Greek and Hebrew on this piece of paper. That was actually written by the hand of Pontius Pilate. That was like the death certificate. This was Pontius Pilate's writing proclaiming who this person is that he ordered executed. Okay, so this is very important. Now, King of the Jews, Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. Very important. So, again, this is just Pontius Pilate that wrote that. But what happened? When he wrote that, he caught shit. He caught shit from the Pharisees that said, "What? What is this Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews? That's not what we told you to write. Why did you write that? You're supposed to say, this guy says he's King of the Jews. Jesus of Nazareth, some guy that says he's the Jews." All right. Anyway, so what did Pontius Pilate say? He goes, "What I have written, I have written." John 19:19 through 22, King James. So be it. So it was written, so it is. So why is that important? It's not just some guy that says he's something. He became what he said he was. He became that de facto, written in stone by none other than Pontius Pilate himself, who would not retract it even after all the squabblings of the people responsible for having him killed, who were clearly at this point the human representations of the enemy on earth. How could you be any more a clear representation of the enemy on earth than the people who were actually conniving to have Jesus killed? Hello. That was probably the only period in time where it was right in front of your face. So these guys bitched because it said Jesus of Nazareth, King of the Jews. They bitched. They said, no, this is not true. This can't be true. This is not right. This is not what we want. And it came to be. Now, I'm just saying this because, first of all, they didn't want that. They've been waiting for a Messiah. They're still waiting for the Messiah. The Jews. Were the Jews that were against this, were they all the Jews? No, they were the Pharisees. They were a tiny sect. Did they represent all the Jews? No. Was he the king of the Jews? He was fast becoming at that time. He was probably the most charismatic, most likable, most followed, most quoted, most loved person alive in that general geographic area. He was Elvis. He was truly the king. This did not sit well with Herod. This did not sit well with the Pharisees. And eventually it did not sit well with Pontius Pilate. Anyway, the point is that we have to believe that this happened. We should believe it happened. We should have faith that it happened. And this is something that's significant because it's not really being argued historically. This was a matter of fact. This is something that they did when people were executed. They put these notes up there on top of the cross. Now, eventually, the body was supposed to turn into yuck. The prisoners were not stuck up there until they were dead and then carefully taken down and buried. No, 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 no. These guys were meant to be stinking clumps of meat alongside of the road to remind people, do not piss off Pontius Pilate or you will become a stinking piece of meat nailed to a piece of wood, some 4x4s on the side of the road. Anyway, that did not happen, of course, because we know that there were strange weather events that took place that drove everybody home in shelter. And this was a great opportunity for, of course, as the Bible tells us, the women in the life of Jesus and some of his friends, I guess, to take him down and stash him away in a grave that they happened to have prepared for somebody else where they could hide his body, because they didn't really have permission, because he was supposed to stay up there as an example. He was supposed to rot up there. They didn't just want to kill him. The crucifixion wasn't just for the purpose of killing him. It was for the purpose of making him a long, permanent, until rotted to nothing reminder. Bones. What happened to the other two guys that were up there? Did they just take them down because we got to make room for the next guys? No. They'd be down the entire road. Hundreds. They could have hundreds of them. And that's why they had to have name tags up there that said who it was in 3 different languages in the handwriting of Pilate. Pretty important stuff. And I think the reason why is because it says right there that Jesus Christ is truly the King of the Jews. And I want you to remember that, because I know that even as you see me bashing Jews, bashing Israel, bashing whatever, saying all these nasty things, like the Grok robot with the Star of David and the yarmulke on his head. Fuck Grok, okay? Elon, shit. Anyway, we know who the enemy is. But we have to be constantly reminded why we're on this mission. What is this mission? This mission is to rip open the doors and show everybody what's inside, what's down there. And if it's the same people that crucified Christ doing the same thing, their blood rituals, their Phoenician sacrifices, their Molech, or their Melkart worship, well, that will become evident, but it has to stop. But the point is that right there, it's saying that Jesus was a king. Who was he? A king of the Jews. The Jews didn't want to admit that he was the king. It wasn't Jesus says he's the king. It's Jesus is the king of the Jews. Jesus is a Jew. Jews are humans. The Jews are wicked. Does that make the king of the Jews wicked? No. Who's wicked? The Pharisees, the same motherfuckers. They're calling themselves Jews that pretend to lead all these people. And sure, is greed involved? Of course it is. But you know what? That's just like all those people that think they're righteous. At the same time, they're into Bitcoin and speculation and bullshit like that. That is not righteous. That's money lending. You know how Jesus felt about that. So I just want you to remember that it's not just the king of the Jews. It's the king of all the humans. Okay? He was already one person, one single person who came here as king of all the humans, not just Jews. He happened to be Jewish, and Pontius Pilate happened to write that down. But he was king of all the humans. And this, of course, is important because eventually you're going to have to get used to that concept again, because there's no such thing as democracy. I kind of like that line from Battle Hymn of the Republic. You know, the first line. Thine eyes have seen the glory of the coming of the Lord. How's the rest of it go? Something about seeking vengeance with his furious, swift sword. Something of this nature. But no, it's not. It's going to be violent. It's going to be violent. It's going to sweep everything aside. There will be no status quo. It's all going to change, one way or the other. Now, I hope you enjoyed that, but I'm going to talk a little bit about, let's see, what do I want to, I guess I'm going to talk a little bit first about the loosh thing. I want to get specific because some of the questions were pretty specific. So let me just say loosh. What is it? Okay, first question, what is it? Why do we have it? Okay, loosh, of course, is negative human emotional psychic energy. And you really cannot not produce it. You make it. You make it whether you like it or not. Okay, now this is the part where I remind everybody that I'm speculating just like everybody else, and that all I can do is really gather up what I know and look at the puzzle and try to look at the pieces that I've assembled and try to see the big picture with what I've assembled. And I've got a lot of the pieces in there than most people. And my puzzle's a little more complete than most, so I see some things that other people might not see. But the other thing I've got is I've got all this exposure to the alien stuff and their beliefs, and not just one species of alien, but different. And there's all sorts of variations. And I just need to remind that to people because I forget, I take it for granted that you should already know these things. So when I start talking about loosh, you have to understand that this is a concept that only exists on the fourth level of density. So right away, you have to understand what the fourth level of density is. And I'm not going to get into that right now. You can go back to look at other shows. But the point is that you also have to understand is that you create energy, and loosh is an energy. It's a human emotional psychic energy that happens to be negative. And this is the energy that is used as food and nutrition for negative entities. Now, of course, we have a 3D equivalent, which is adrenochrome. And as you know, with the collection of adrenochrome, it's meant as a maximum form of torture, usually to the purest souls. I mean, it's much sweeter when it comes from the sweetest for these people, of course, is an abortion, because that baby isn't even born and it doesn't have any form of corruption whatsoever. It's as close to God as they can get. That's why they love abortion so much. But either way, a small child that has been tortured and caused to create this fear and terror and adrenaline is going to provide a lot of adrenochrome and at the same time also provide a lot of loosh. And this is farmed, not just like adrenochrome is farmed, the 4D is also farmed. Now, to understand the mechanics of loosh and how it connects to your soul and how it connects to the 4D and all these things, these are things that we'll explore based, of course, on what I can share with you from what my experience. So this is mostly intuition. And of course, if you're not learning to use your intuition, it's strictly your gut. Okay, learn to listen to that. So, how is it taken? What happens when it's taken? Well, first of all, from what I understand, and what I've, of course, seen in the astral and had the experience or ability to remember, because a lot of times they said I don't remember anything, and the only time I remember anything, of course, is when I do it wide awake. So on the trips that I'd had to take, the few trips, because I don't like doing it, one time, of course, we did visibly see the loosh, and we were having to deal with portals and stuff like that, and I'll explain all that later. But let me just say that a lot of people like to talk about the tentacles or the legs of the spider. And the spider, of course, is something that keeps being brought up, and I don't think people really understand what that is, but you basically have a tentacle attached to you, like to your head. And this exists in the 4D. Now, it's like a thread, connects you to something else, but this is a black one. It's like a black pipe. It's like you're hooked up to the Matrix, kind of like that, only this thing is sucking this out of your head. Now this black stuff, you could also call the black goo. I know a lot of people talk about black goo, but this is the real black goo. And black goo is AI. And the reason why it's AI is because it is alive, it is a life form, but it's an artificial life form, therefore it has no soul. And as such, it can do things that other life forms with souls can't do, like operate in two different densities at the same time. In this case, the third density and the fourth density. So what we know, at least what I've seen, what I'm going to share with you right now, is basically these tentacles that connect to everybody that are sucking the loosh out of you. You got to try not to produce it. They love it when you produce it, but it's best to try to keep those things running dry if you can. There's really nothing you can do about it. You can't make that thing go away. As Jedi, what we do is we will take that black goo and purify it, turn it white. I mean, seriously, you can't stop this thing from doing its thing. It's a life form, but the black goo, the end of the tentacles seem to terminate in a portal. And I haven't explored where that portal goes, but I'm assuming it's down to lower levels to where they can use it to feed who's ever consuming it. And so what we'll do, at least as Jedi, and again, this is Wide Awake, Stephen, talking about this stuff, we will take that stuff and first of all turn it white, because basically it's these souls. A lot of times this stuff is being sucked from people who are already dead. But we will turn it white, and then we will create a different portal or redirect it to source. So instead of flowing down below and feeding the negative entities, we purify it and send it to source. Send it back home, not below. Stop feeding the down below. That's the best I could visually give you the representation. As far as how it feels, what happens, that's really kind of an interesting concept. I think you guys probably know when you're making it, certainly. When your emotions are in the dumps, that's when you're making loosh. So think of how you feel when your heart is broken, or you're hurt or jealous or angry or hateful or any of this, those loss of control, etc. That is certainly the effects of loosh production. So obviously you need to control that and try to keep things as flat as possible. I mean, certainly you want to produce the opposite. How is it taken? Well, we covered that. What can we do with it? Well, again, this is like trying to harness bad chi. We know that the energy flows through us, the negative and the positive energy. And we try to keep it in equal amounts as much as possible, balanced, because that is the best way to achieve higher levels of consciousness, is to have that energy, that yin and yang, perfectly balanced. That's the ideal situation. Very hard to achieve. So to suggest that loosh is associated with this is very well possible. It could be bad chi. Loosh in general could be bad chi, the flow of bad chi. There could be loosh rivers flowing around us. This is why feng shui dictates how you build your home, to prevent the flow of bad chi into your home and your workspace and your living area. Too much energy. Some of us that consume energy, or let's just say are made stronger by it, I don't mind. I had a fire hydrant in the front door, right next to the front door of my place of business for years. Very bad feng shui. I had a Bhagwan mirror just over my front door to try to reflect some of the energy, but I realized it was that energy made me strong. I absorbed that energy. Something to be aware of if you want to study feng shui. So as far as what you can do with it, the idea is, yes, you need to balance your energy, but at the same time, you need to purge it. You don't need to gather it up. I know that people like to think of Dragon Ball Z or whatever, where you're the Kung Fu masters building up this death blow, where it's essentially harnessing a big ball of negative chi in the gut and releasing it as a blast of energy. Now I've actually done that, but it's actually more like releasing a negative energy, negative chi. That's not something you should try to do. and you're trying to have the energy flow through you and be balanced and not be built up. It's like when people say they're enhancing their Merkaba. When you do that, when you're enhancing your Merkaba or whatever it is, you're basically directing all your energy in the upwards direction, the negative direction, as opposed to the downward direction, which is the positive direction. And that's not a good thing. No, you don't want to be doing that. Okay, so enhancing your Merkaba, no. The idea is to try to enhance that energy through positive ways, and I'm not going to get into how you do that tonight, but just be advised that channeling that energy and using it for destructive purposes is not a good thing. So the only thing you could do with that loosh is use it for destructive purposes, and I don't want that. Now, let's see. Is it only fear or can it be love? Okay, love, of course, is the opposite of that emotion, and obviously, as somebody that clearly is hungry for that emotion, basically in the human form, that's three hormones. Let me just see if I could pull up those hormones real quick. Oh, here it is right here. And those hormones are dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. And we all have these hormones in different levels. Like anxiety is basically a little bit of dopamine and zero serotonin, oxytocin. Same thing with depression, various negative feelings like that. But the one you're looking for is love, and love is practically 100% dopamine, serotonin, and oxytocin. Boy, that's your magic elixir right there. So I can probably tell you, I think it's safe to say that the blood products, especially the adrenochrome, the adrenaline, which has a spiritual 4D connection, of course, to the loosh, is certainly related to your production of hormones. I think that's pretty important stuff. Let's see, what else did you say? The unseen connection that we can feel just seeing someone. Okay, there again, you're getting into the concept of the bond, okay, or the thread. So, yes, you have a loose thread, you have a thread of negative energy that's basically AI flowing from you, but this energy is no different than the so-called energy that your body produces, which is an assortment of different types of energy. You have FM frequency modulations. You also have light, coherent light being put out of your body, which comes from the resonance of every cell in your body. And that is basically your aura, or your glow. And your aura, of course, is a combination of multiple different forms of energy, but the one I like to focus on, of course, is the light energy that we put out, because I feel that that's very important. The other one that's very important is your magnetic induction. Magnetic induction is incredibly important. All mass puts out these waves of magnetic field, which are the magnetic induction, and you can see that during an eclipse. The sun, you see those plumes coming out of the sun. Those are not that's magnetic induction. That's not flame. Very important stuff. That's the power that makes us powerful. That's the power that we are using and basically increasing our skill at using when we're using psychic skill and chi flow and all this stuff. It enhances this magnetic induction, of course, which is that glow, which is that aura, which is that torus around you. Okay, that's what the magnetic induction is, and that's what your that big torus around you is. Obviously, these physical manifestations of your feelings and your hormones have a lot to do with what you're putting out, and obviously, this is through service to others. If you want to get the maximum amount of those hormones, obviously it's going to come through service to others. This is why when you're in love, you're going to do anything you can for that person, because you feel compelled to serve that person and provide that service. That's really what it is. So obviously the easiest way to achieve that is through service to others, which will also increase that energy, increase that flow, increase that torus, and essentially make you impervious. And I want to put that message out to all the TIs that listen to me that want protection from the negative shit. If you want protection from the negative shit, serve others, and you will have a force field. That's what we're talking about here. It's the best way to combat delusion and everything else. And yes, you do have a bond with somebody that you're in love with. And obviously, if you've had a physical relationship with a person, that also produces a bond, an actual thread or a rope, whatever. There's all sorts of different words that they use to describe this. But I'll tell you, in the Hebrew faith, they have a part of the divorce ceremony which is basically cutting the cord. I think that's kind of wicked. I think that anytime you have true love with anybody and you have that kind of cord situation, there's no reason why you would want to cut that whatsoever. I mean, I think that's probably a gift and you should enjoy it. Let's see, what else? Does it help us in the astral? Let's see, let me just back up a little bit. What can we do with it? Is it only fear or love? Is that unseen connection we can feel seeing someone? Is it a gift or does everyone have it? Does it help us in the astral? Does it connect us to God? Do we have more when we're young and lose it as we age? Okay, wow. Okay, that's an interesting comment right there. First of all, we are ageless. I want to remind everybody, this is getting into that soul business. We're going to transition into the soul business, is that your soul is eternal. And is your human soul special? Of course, your human soul is the most special thing in creation. But at the same time, everything has a soul because everything is of creation. And our souls are special because we have special gifts that we got as being human that basically make us in the image of God. And of course, when we were hybridized by the various enemy entities that we're dealing with in our fight against the evil under the Getty that we're going to get into, we weren't supposed to have a soul. They tried to remove that from us biologically, by our head, changing our physiology. They tried to physically remove one of our chakras and try to sever our connection to God, but it didn't work. We still have a soul, and we still have our foot in these other levels of density, which is why we're able to feed higher levels of density, because that's how it works in this system. Everything goes up. This is why humans don't eat humans. Humans are allowed to eat from the lower levels of density. We are allowed to eat. And of course, as vegans, that's the ultimate cruelty. So those of you that are looking for ways to serve others, it's a very important lesson, is to serve animals and plants. Honor it all. Honor all creation. But it's a lot easier to serve others when you're helping animals or helping plants than it is helping humans. I think you all know what I'm talking about. And trust me, you don't get extra special brownie points when it comes to helping humans more than you would get by helping a poor animal. You have to have respect for those animals. Now, I'm not telling you not to eat animals, because obviously I still eat meat. I regret, but I'm a growing boy. I need my protein. It's unfortunate. But I'll tell you what's more important is the honor and respect that you give, because I'll tell you, I'm really upset with China. And I can't understand why Putin can make the alliance that he has. I mean, we must be truly wicked here in the United States for Putin to get into bed with China, because I know Putin loves animals. In China, there is no law against cruelty to animals. Skinning kittens for their fur to make lining for handbags or whatever stupid bullshit people buy from China to have fur on it. Where do you think that fur comes from? Kittens. The guys that sell dogs in the street, dog doesn't sell, they'll just kill it right there on the street. They'll take puppies and throw it down on the ground and kill it right there. There's no law against that. It's just a product. Now, I know developed humans are beyond that. And I do my best not to hate people. You want to not hate people, obviously Netanyahu coming in, very much hateful. But the reason why I talked about the cross at the beginning, and Jesus being the King of the Jews, is to remind you that we don't hate Jesus. Jesus is our commander, and we can't hate the people that he's the king of. That's like saying Satan is the king of the Jews. Of course we hate Satan. No, Yahweh is the king of the Jews. Jesus is not Yahweh. The Creator is not Yahweh. But the real lesson, of course, is that Jesus is the king of all of us. And when the time comes, you're all going to go back to that despotic reign of a single king, father figure. whether they like it or not. The guy's going to come home with a sword swinging. I don't want to pursue too much the other question. I think about the Vrills and what have you. I'll just look at it really quickly. Do the Vrills have a soul, a human soul, or are the victims lizards? Lizards, of course, we're talking about the fourth density entities. We're talking about entities who have a soul, yes, but they have chosen the path of service to self. And once you've reached that level of development, the 4D, and you are still a service to self entity, you degenerate and you cannot go back to serving others. And the only way out of that loop is through the lake of fire. And trust me, Rambo has tossed many into the lake of fire. And is that so bad? No. You come out on the other end clean, and you can join the rest of the family, the universal family. That's what I've learned. So as far as all these negative entities, what we do, what happens to their souls are the only thing left once they pass through the fire. And the souls come out clean. That's what I can tell you. And I think that's really important to remember when you start thinking about the negative enemies that we're dealing with. You know, like the guys that had Jesus nailed to the cross. All right? It's very important because, again, we're all human. And right now, even though I talk a lot of shit about the Jews, I don't want you to come back at me with some kind of Nazi crap. Seriously. That is not going to make it. Because Jesus is the king of the Jews. And he's our king too. He's everybody's king. Not just the Jews. Whether the Jews like it or not. But again, it's not the Jews, it's the Pharisees who are what? Phoenicians. All right? I'm not going to stay too long. It's going to be almost over here pretty quick. I do want to thank you guys for sticking with me. Especially, we have a decent amount of people here. I want to say, hey, Wooter, how you doing? Everyone else, I'm sure, is here. Thank you for joining me tonight. And please, if you haven't done it yet, read the book. If you're a first-time listener, thank you. Please tune in next week. Read the book, though. Join the page, the Occupy the Getty / Stephen D. Kelly page group. We're now up to 6,219 members. We're growing pretty good, and I'm very thankful about that, but that's just more proof that things are changing. And yes, after Trump got shot, and he did get shot with a bullet, screw all you people that come up with all these stupid ideas. I don't care how many shooters there were. I don't care who did it. It doesn't matter. The guy's alive, and we're on a timeline that we did not plan, that they did not plan, that is giving us a whole lot of new opportunities, and we're taking advantage of that stuff right now and making our own future. Whoever can do it better than the next guy is going to be the winner. So please help me with this plan, which, of course, is Occupy the Getty. It's the only plan that makes any difference. Everything else is bullshit. You don't have to know all the details, but just forget what you learned before. Very important. All right, everybody, if there's anybody out there that wants to help with the mission, and of course, I don't really care about money, but I do appreciate any assistance we do get. It helps buy the cats food. And I got to tell you something. I was giving outdoor kitties some of this food that we give to the cats that have the kidney issues. And, man, they like that stuff. They lick that plate clean. I'm like, wow, you like that expensive stuff? Ugh. Anyway. But it also reminds me, you know, a lot of food is getting really expensive, and a lot of people are going to be starving here, and they're doing that on purpose. They're trying to kill us. They're doing all these terrible things, and it's not just us. It's the animals. It's those kitty cats. I know as people start scrimping on their shopping around here, and a steak costs $100, you know what I'm talking about. The kitties suffer. They're the first ones to suffer. The animals, the ones that are out there. So I want you to try to remember that. And also I want you to remember the kitties that are suffering in Palestine and other places of the world. All right? Very important. But most of all, I want you to focus on Occupy the Getty. But if you do want to help me out economically, of course, send it to the PayPal, which is StephenKelly714@yahoo.com. Say it's for a friend or family. You got to find a little place to click that. Otherwise, if they charge me taxes, I have to send it back because I'm not a business. And I do appreciate all you guys' help. And if you want to talk to me for whatever reason at all, other than joining my group here, you can talk to me at the group. Send me an email to law17gun@aol.com. That's LAW17GUN@aol.com. And I'll do my best to report back to you. If you want to get a copy of the book, you can do that. And you can also learn about becoming a Jedi, which of course is very important if you guys are still interested in doing that. And the Jedi do a lot of work in the 4D. We're busy changing reality. You know, a lot of people go, what the hell does this 4D stuff have to do with reality? And we got guns and bullets, and what do you got? Jedi? You know what? The people that run this world bow to the people that we're destroying. That was one of the questions that this person was asking here. Do they die? Do they have souls? Do the Jedi, what effect do the Jedi have on the Dracos, Greys, Anunnaki? Do they die? Do they have souls? Do they go back to Source? Are these the only here and thereafter other places in the universe? If so, yes. Yes, yes, yes. The Draco, the Anunnaki, and the Grey are the ones that the Jedi fight. Those are the demons we fight. We are destroying them. We are genociding them. They go into the lake of fire in great bundles. They come out clean on the other end to Source, just like you said. And yes, they don't exist just on the Earth. They exist in other places of the universe. To a Jedi, that does not matter. Right now, we're focused on Earth, occupy the Getty, clean up the Earth, bring paradise back to Earth. But that doesn't mean once we've done that, it's done. No. As I said, your soul is eternal, the fight is eternal, and Jedi don't just fight on the Earth. We also fight the enemy anywhere they are until they are completely eradicated from the universe, and we get paradise again. And that's what we were created for, and that's what it's all about. So I hope you guys will join me, and I hope you appreciate the value of your service and understand that you're not just a weak human. You're not just a stupid slave. You're not any of these labels that they attach to you. You are a massively powerful entity of the universe. You're an individual at this point. Eventually we all return to Source, so we are all connected. But at this time, together, all of us working together, we can change our timeline, we can change reality, we can move mountains, we can do anything. And that's what we're doing right now with the Occupy the Getty mission. All right? Anyway, once again, I want to thank you guys all for joining me, all of you here. I do really appreciate everything that you do. Your work is so good. I'm so proud of you all, and I thank you, and I hope that you will help me get this job done sooner than later. Okay? So with that, I'll see you soon. I'll see you next week. I hope you enjoyed the recording. Again, my name is Stephen D. Kelly. This is Truth Cat Radio, www.truthcatradio.com. This is Stephen D. Kelly Show. We'll see you next week. Right now, it's 6:51 at July 25th, 2024. Good night. God bless. Adios. And goodbye.